The snow came early that year and settled over the broken station like the world had quietly decided to move on without her. Mara Jun sat alone on the cold iron bench at Cinder Trace. Her wool coat stretched tight over her round belly that was not hidden, not safe, and not wanted by anyone who had promised to take care of her. The last train of the day had already hissed and vanished into the white distance. She watched its smoke fade like a goodbye she should have never trusted. She had come with one suitcase and half a promise. Now only the suitcase remained. The wooden platform creaked in the wind. A torn timetable hung crooked on the wall. Cinder Trace was not the kind of place people came to start a life. It was the kind of place where people were dropped off and forgotten. Mara knew that truth too well. She had taken the train from Abilene chasing Thomas Cray's smooth words, chasing the idea of a future he painted bright with gold and new beginnings. Instead, she found herself here, abandoned in the middle of nowhere, carrying a child he never wanted. He had called her old at 38, had looked at her belly like it was a burden he owed nothing to, and then he walked away. At the third stop before the mountain pass, no ring, no name, no home. Just a cold goodbye and a suggestion that she should head back east. But east was ashes, a place with no one left to care if she lived or died. She pulled her coat closer and pressed a hand over her belly. The baby kicked gently, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. She whispered softly, "We'll figure this out." Somehow, a boy passed with a basket of apples. Mara offered a tired smile. He looked away. Folks here weren't cruel, but they knew enough to keep distance from trouble when it arrived with a suitcase and a swollen belly. Snow drifted across the tracks in slow, heavy sheets. The sky darkened. The cold deepened. Mara accepted her fate. She would sleep on the bench if she had to. Tomorrow she would walk into town and beg for sewing work. Maybe someone needed curtains stitched or shirts mended. Her hands still remembered how to make broken things useful again. A soft creak came from the far end of the platform. She lifted her head. A man stepped out from the long shadow beneath the roof overhang, tall, quiet, wrapped in a charcoal-colored coat and scarf. His hat brim hid most of his face, but his presence felt steady, not threatening. He moved with the stillness of someone who had lived too long with storms and learned not to fear them. Mara looked away. Men who approached in silence usually carried plans they never intended to keep. He stopped a few steps from her. The wind blew between them, carrying small bursts of snow that swirled like a veil. "Evening," she said politely. "You missed your train?" His voice was low and rough, like gravel smoothed by years of weather. "No," she said, "it missed me." He nodded once. Not in pity, not in confusion, just in acceptance. More silence stretched, and this one felt different, not heavy, not dangerous, just there. He stepped closer, slow and even. "Station's got no fire. Snow's coming in harder now. You got shelter somewhere?" "I don't take charity," she answered. He shrugged gently. "Didn't offer that, just warmth and supper. That's neighborly, not charity." She gripped her suitcase tighter. From inside the station house, a door creaked open. Emma, the old station keeper, stepped out, shawl tied around her shoulders. "Elias," she called, "road lice by moonrise. You best get going." The man tipped his hat. "Just saw someone sitting alone." Emma looked at Mara and softened. "Child, you can stay in the back room if you'd rather. Dusty, but it has walls. Walls with no fire, no heat, no food." Mara turned back to the man. "What's your name?" she asked. "Elias Hart. Where's your place?" "North Ridge. Cabin's warm, no one there but me and a mule." She studied him carefully. His coat was worn but clean. His boots sturdy, his voice calm. Nothing about him looked false. "What do you want for it?" she asked. He looked at her belly once, not long enough to judge her, just long enough to understand. "Nothing," he said. "No one ought to sleep cold when there's room enough for two by the stove." Mara stood slowly, her knees aching from the cold. She picked up her suitcase. The world tilted a little from exhaustion, but she held steady. "All right," she said quietly. They walked down the steps side by side, not touching, not speaking. At the bottom, as the pines swayed above them and the wind curled around their coats, Elias paused. He looked at her with a calm certainty, something steady that pushed back the storm around them. "You're mine now," he said softly. Her breath caught, not in fear, not in confusion. In recognition, he didn't mean owned. He meant kept safe. She nodded once, and together they stepped toward the waiting wagon as snow deepened around their footprints like the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both of them now needed. The mule snorted as Elias tightened the reins, its breath rising in soft white clouds under the moonlight. The wagon creaked forward, old wood and iron singing in the cold night air. Mara sat beside him, her suitcase tucked between her boots, her hands buried in her coat sleeves. She kept her eyes ahead, watching the tall pine trees bend under the weight of the snow. They rose around the road like dark giants guarding a place forgotten by the rest of the world. They didn't speak, not for the first mile, not even the second. But the silence didn't feel sharp the way it used to with Thomas. This one felt steady, like a blanket laid gently across their shoulders. Elias held the reins with calm hands, guiding the mule through the twisting trail. Mara could feel the tiredness in her bones settling deeper with each step of the wagon. But for the first time in days, she didn't feel afraid of what came next. When the cabin finally appeared, it was like a breath she didn't know she'd been holding finally escaped her chest. Smoke curled from the chimney. A soft glow came through the window. A single path had been cleared to the door, each shovel line clean and steady. Someone had worked at it with care, not haste. Elias stepped down first and tied the mule. He held his hand out to help her down. She hesitated, then placed her fingers in his. His grip was warm and solid, a small comfort she didn't expect to feel. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her instantly. A fire snapped in the stone hearth, throwing golden light across the room. The cabin was plain but orderly. A table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with jars and tins, a rifle hanging quietly on a peg, and a cot neatly made in the corner. "You can take the bed," Elias said, unlacing his boots. "I'll take the floor or the chair." "I can sleep on the floor," she replied. "I've done worse." "Not tonight," he said simply. There was no edge in his voice, no demand, no hidden meaning, just care. He handed her a folded wool blanket. Her hands trembled as she took it, though she wasn't sure if the shaking came from the cold or the relief of being somewhere safe. "I don't want to be trouble," she said softly. "You're not," he replied. "And this is no trouble." Mara sat on the edge of the cot. The fire warmed her face. The child pressed gently from inside her belly. It was the first time in weeks she felt the ground under her finally stop moving. Elias poured warm broth into a tin cup and passed it to her. She sipped carefully, the salty warmth spreading through her chest. "You cook," she said. "Out of necessity," he answered. "It isn't much, but it keeps a man on his feet." She almost smiled. Almost. Her eyes drifted to a little carved horse on the mantel. Its mane was cut with surprising grace. "You made that?" He nodded. "Used to carve at night. Silence needs something to hold." She stared into the fire, her voice softer now. "I used to sew. Curtains, linens, wedding veils sometimes. I thought if I made beautiful things, maybe life would give me something beautiful back." He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was gentle. "I imagine you've made more peace with those hands than most men do in a lifetime." Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not without wanting something in return. "You always speak like that," she whispered. "Like your thoughts are written down before you say them." "Words should earn their place," he answered. Mara wrapped her arms around herself, letting the fire warm her legs. "I won't stay where I'm not welcome," she said. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he took a second blanket from the shelf and placed it near the cot. "You get the bed," he said. "That's not kindness. That's just right." She nodded. Later, when the fire had died down and the cabin settled into a deep, peaceful quiet, Mara lay awake, watching the ceiling beams. The baby shifted again, and she placed a hand over her belly. From the chair across the room, Elias murmured, "All right?" "Yes," she whispered, just thinking. Another silence passed, long and soft. Then she said quietly, "You don't expect anything, and I won't give what's not asked for." Elias didn't speak, but she felt the truth of his presence too deeply to doubt it. Snow drifted down outside, soft against the roof. Inside, the fire crackled low, and the air thickened with the safety she had long forgotten. Days passed in a slow, gentle rhythm. Mara rose early, sweeping the floor and feeding the chickens that pecked around the yard. Her belly grew heavier, her steps slower, but she never complained. Elias noticed. He chopped wood before dawn, built her a stool to ease her back, heated water at dusk so she could soak her tired feet. He did it without fanfare, without asking for thanks. One afternoon, while she stitched curtains from scraps in a trunk, she spoke without looking up. "I keep waiting," she said, "for the cost." "There's no ledger here," Elias replied. She swallowed hard. It was difficult to believe, but a small part of her, a tired part, wanted to. That peace lasted until the sound of hooves broke across the clearing. Too many hooves, too fast. Elias stood from the woodpile, axe in hand, eyes narrowing toward the hill. Mara stepped onto the porch, one hand on her belly. Then he appeared, Thomas Cray, riding into their quiet life like a storm breaking through an open door. Her heart froze. Elias didn't move. Thomas dismounted with a smirk she remembered too well. "Darlin'," he said, "miss me?" She said nothing. Not yet. Thomas looked at Elias. "So, you're the one keeping her?" Elias's voice was steady. "She isn't something to keep." Thomas laughed. "I've come to bring her home." Mara stepped forward, her spine straight. "I was never your home." His smile cracked. Elias moved between them, calm, certain. Thomas's eyes narrowed. His pride stung. "You deny me what's mine." Mara met his gaze. "I was never yours, and I never will be." Thomas reached for his pistol. Elias lifted his rifle, slow and steady. "You want to draw," he said. "You better mean it." Silence fell. Thomas hesitated. Then he spat in the snow and turned away. "This ain't over," he muttered. Mara exhaled shakily as he rode off. Elias placed a gentle hand near her arm. "You're safe." She nodded, though her knees trembled, for now. But the storm wasn't done with them yet. Dawn never truly arrived. It crept in gray and slow, wrapped in a cold that felt deeper than winter itself. Mara woke with a sharp twist low in her belly that stole her breath. She braced herself on the cabin wall, fingers digging into the wood. Another wave of pain rolled through her, stronger, anchoring her where she stood. Elias stirred from the chair near the hearth. He was at her side before she could speak, steady and calm, one hand on her back. "It's time?" he asked. She nodded, jaw tight, sweat already gathering on her brow. There was no midwife, no doctor, no neighbor close enough to reach before the storm would make the road useless. But Elias didn't hesitate. He moved like a man who had known emergencies before, boiling water, laying out clean linen, lighting lamps to push back the dull blue morning light. Mara labored through the rising hours, silent except for the short breaths she fought to control. Pain came like a tide, sharp, fierce, certain. She clung to Elias's hand when each wave hit. He never pulled away. He never looked afraid. He just held her steady, grounding her with quiet words. "I'm here. You're strong." "She's almost here." When the final moment arrived, she cried out, a deep, raw sound that filled the whole cabin. And then suddenly, beautifully, the air shifted. A new cry broke the silence. Elias caught the baby in his hands, wrapped her quickly in the blanket they had folded the night before. His hands trembled, but not from fear. "It's a girl," he whispered. Mara reached out, tears sliding freely down her cheeks now. Not from pain, but from awe, from relief, from the long fight that led her to this room. "Let me see her." He placed the baby against her chest. The tiny girl blinked up at her with a fierce, fresh will to live. Mara wept harder. "She's here," Elias said softly. "We're whole," Mara whispered. Hours passed in a quiet, sacred rhythm. Elias kept the fire alive. Mara held the baby close, drifting between sleep and aching joy. He made tea without being asked. He checked on her without crowding. His presence filled the space with calm. But just when peace felt finally possible, a knock broke through the stillness. 3 soft taps. Elias rose without making a sound. He took up the rifle from the wall and approached the door. The knock came again, slow, uncertain, filled with something dark. Mara tightened her hold on the baby. "It's him!" Elias murmured after looking through the frosted window. "Thomas." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Don't go out there," she whispered. "I won't," he said. "Not unless he steps in." Another knock, then a slurred voice dripping with whiskey and wounded pride. "You think you can shut me out forever, Elias? Let me see her." "She's not yours," Elias said through the door. Thomas scoffed. "I fed her once. Doesn't that count for something?" "You left her cold," Elias said. "You don't get to claim a life you abandoned." Silence fell, heavy as snowfall. Mara took a shaky breath. "Let me talk to him." Elias turned sharply. "No, I need to," she said, her voice steady in a way it had never been before. "This has always been mine to end." He hesitated, then nodded once. She stood, cradling the baby, and opened the door slowly. Elias stayed behind her, rifle lifted just enough. Thomas stood a few paces away, snow on his boots, his hair wild, his eyes bloodshot. He looked at the baby first, then at Mara's face. Something faltered in him, a sagging of pride, a flicker of something hollow. "You don't know what you're doing," Thomas slurred. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Mara said. "You were mine." "No," she said firmly. "I was lonely, and you used that. But I was never yours." He took half a step forward. Elias chambered around. Thomas froze. "You want to prove you're the man you pretend to be?" Mara said. "Then leave. Walk away. Don't come back. She'll never know me." "She doesn't need to." He stared at her. For the first time, he looked empty instead of angry. Then he spat in the snow, turned, and left. No threats this time, no promises. Just a man walking away from a life he never truly held. Mara closed the door gently. The latch clicked. The cabin breathed again. She sank into the chair by the fire, exhausted but lighter than she'd ever been. Elias set the rifle aside and knelt in front of her. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "Now I am." He touched her hand carefully, as if asking permission without words. "You don't have to know what comes next," he said softly. "You don't have to decide anything today." She looked down at the sleeping baby, then at him. "I think I'd like to stay." His smile came slow and warm, like sunrise spreading over the ridge. "You're already here," he said. And in that quiet cabin, wrapped in firelight and new beginnings, Mara finally let herself believe it. She was home,